Drinking culture in Japan. An endless supply of alcohol. You can nearly find an izakaya everywhere you go. And if you want to have an all-you-can-drink, so drink as much as you want in 2 hours, you just pay around about 10 to 15 euros. So in this video, let me tell you why drinking in Japan is so cheap and also the reason for the man sleeping on the street. So basically, I'm a student majoring in Japanese studies, and I went to Japan for 1 year as an exchange student. And in this year, I had many occasions where I went drinking with friends from my university and even just friends I normally met in Japan. I also write my bachelor thesis kind of about Japanese culture, and also when I went outside drinking, I took the occasion to have a talk with some Japanese salaryman or even with a drunk Japanese elderly. So yeah, I think I can give you a small insight into the drinking culture of Japan. So before we start to talk about why Japanese people drink so much, let's first talk about what Japanese drinking culture is even called in Japan. And usually when you go drink together with your friends, you will refer to the word of nomikai. And if you're not fond to the Japanese language, nomi means to drink and kai means to meet. So you're meeting to drink. And basically you usually meet at an izakaya. And also the word izakaya, as it sounds, is also a Japanese word. Izakaya in this case consists of 3 kanji that have the meaning of to be, alcohol and shop. So basically when you go for a nomikai to an izakaya, you go to drink, to meet some people, to meet with some people, and you're there at the shop to get some alcohol. And pretty obvious, right? But why do Japanese people go there so often? I mean, you could also meet people when you're not drinking, right? But also in my impression in my exchange semester, I saw that usually when you wanted to meet people, the first thing they were talking about was nomikai. But why is that so? So before we talk about the topic, why nomikais are that common, we need to first dive into some cultural context in Japan. And basically there are 3 I want to showcase you from now on. But before I show you these kind of cultural concepts, I want you to remember that at the end we're talking about people. So usually not everyone in the same culture has the same character and the same way they do something. So if I would talk about, in this case, let's say American culture, maybe there are some Japanese people you will be more close than with some American people, even though you have the same culture and should have the same cultural context. So in this case, I just want you to remember that the cultural theories I tell you right now and the opinions I have about this, they're just general directions. It is not that everyone in Japan is the same, it's just that there are some directions that many people tend to go in. So yeah, let's get right into it. So first I will try to explain to you the concept of hone and tatemai. And basically hone and tatemai is something that I came across in my Japanese studies too and also used for my bachelor thesis because it's this central cultural concept in Japan. And basically hone, if you look at the kanji of hone, it consists of the kanji for, in this case, real and sound. So it is the real sound. So basically hone means what you really think and what really your opinion is about some topic. So for example, when you go together with your friends for shopping clothes and they look at you and say, how do I look? And usually you will try to tell your friend that they look good if they look excited about their new clothing, instead of telling them that they don't look good, even though this is your real sound or what you really think. And there we come to the concept of tatemai. So tatemai means something, in this case, to build in front. And basically you can imagine it like something you build in front of your opinion, so people will not see your real opinion or your real impression of something. In this case, some people will maybe do it if you go shopping with your friend and you see they like a kind of piece of clothing. Maybe you will not tell them your real opinion because they're happy with it, and in this occasion, you will build something in front of your opinion or in front of yourself to show them that it looks good, even though you don't think it. And basically you can see that every culture has this concept of hone and tatemae. So usually it is referred to Japan, but in my opinion, I think it's something that every culture has. So maybe if you're talking to your parents, or maybe if you're talking to your supervisor or your teacher at university, you will maybe not always say the things as directly as you think them, um, compared to when you're with your friends. But where is the connection to alcohol in Japan? And basically, just you have to imagine that in Japan you have the concept of hone and tatemae too, but the difference is that tatemae plays a much, much bigger role in Japan than in other countries. And that is the reason why people like to go drinking. Because one reason is that when you go drinking, you're usually more open about what you think. And in Japan, this is the perfect way for many people to get to know each other. So they will kind of take away what they build in front of them and speak the real sound or speak what they really think. So usually a nomikai is just a way for many Japanese people to kind of drop the formalities they always have and to get in contact with each other and to have a really clear discussion about certain topics. But yeah, in this case, you will maybe ask me something like, yeah, but Victor, if you're outside with your friends just playing basketball, for example, or if you're playing football, or you're just outside together in, let's say, drinking a coffee together, why can you not have hone there too? What is the problem with this? And that is kind of the difference with Japanese and, let's say, European or American culture, that in Japan or that in America and in my case in Germany, people will usually talk about their opinions more freely, even talk about their opinions to people that they met for the first time. But there's another concept, and well, it's kind of mixed inside the other concept that I explained to you, but that is something that I recognized when I went to Japan, and it basically goes something like this. The thing that I found out was that basically in European or American countries, you can say something like that: my freedom creates barriers for other people. And in Japan, you can say the vice versa, that my barriers create freedom for other people. And to explain to you what I mean by this, let's take a really common example of you're sitting in the train. If you live in Europe or if you live in America, you'll maybe often have the occasion that, let's say, you're exhausted from work and you want to sleep, but you cannot sleep because the person next to you is eating their hamburger and the person in front of you is listening to music inside the train. And basically, European and American countries in this case, or English speaking countries also, they're pretty free. So you can do what you like, you can tell the opinion that you like, but because if, for example, in the train example, if I decide to listen to music inside the train and take the freedom to listen to music inside the train, then of course it will um, like go inside the barrier of someone else. So another person that wants to sleep, he will be bothered by my freedom in this case. And of course, I know this is not an example that like everyone is doing in every countries, and I think in Europe and in America also it's seen kind of badly when people are maybe too loud in the train. But I think you can get the general idea that I want to tell you here. On the other hand, if you went to Japanese trains, then you may have recognized one thing, that it's pretty silent inside those trains. And one reason for this is because people really try to bring back their own thinking, their own emotions, their hone, their own opinions, to not get inside the barriers of other people. And that is basically the thing. In Japan, you kind of limit your own freedom more than you would do in other countries, but it has the advantage that you don't limit the freedom of other people by taking your own freedom. And of course, there are also people in Japan that are allowed on the trains, and there are also people in Japan that don't respect the barriers of other people. But like I told you, it's a direction. It's a general cultural norm, and it is considered as a good thing in Japan to do it like this, but it doesn't mean that everyone does it like this or that everyone has the, let's say, thinking about tatemae and hone that I just explained to you. And then maybe you will ask something like, but why is it different in Europe and different in Japan? How much hone you can, let's say, have in certain situations. And about this, I will talk in the second part. So let me finish the third theory. So the other theory that also comes to nomikai is called uchi and soto. And basically uchi means inside. Usually when you talk about uchi, you refer to your family too, or you can say something like in group. And then there's something called soto, so people outside. And usually Japanese people try to really distinguish between uchi group and soto group. So people in your inside group and in your outside group. If you see it, let's say from a European standpoint, you can say something like your close friends and maybe just some people you met sometimes, or your, let's say, work and study colleagues. And usually work and study colleagues, people you're not that close to each other, will go to a soto group, and people that are really close to you will go to the uchi group. And that is the thing. If you want to kind of determine in Japan which kind of relationship you have to a person, then being a part of a nomikai is a thing you kind of have to do. Because there people really speak their opinion, and in this case you can kind of find out, the person really has this kind of opinion about me, and there you can find out if the person belongs to your in-group or your outside group. And basically finding out the real opinion about a person, there's some example I will tell you at the end of the video that I experienced myself. And also, if you don't go to the nomikai too, people will kind of consider that you don't want to belong to that group because you don't want to share your opinion. And that is also something I will explain at the end. But for now, you learned about the concept of hone and tatemae, about the concept of freedom and barriers, and about the concept of uchi and soto and what they have to do with nomikai. But let's just first talk about this. Where does those concepts even come from, and why did it become differently in Japan than in, let's say, Germany, for example? So in this case, I will just take the Western countries as one thing, and my main experiences come from the German culture. But we can say, in this case for Germany, we're pretty individualistic. You can tell your opinion when you want to tell your opinion. Even people want to hear about your opinion, and it is even considered a virtue to tell the truth and your opinion. When you like to dress a bit differently than other people, then you will just dress differently. If you maybe don't like to be at a certain place, then you can go home earlier. We are pretty free because our society is focused on the individual person. But that is not the reason for Japan, and usually Japan is referred, in contrast to European societies, as a group-oriented society. So where does this even come from, and why do people, like I told you in the beginning with Hone and Tatemae, try to not show their real sound or their opinion? Why do people kind of tend to hide their real intentions or opinions? And basically it comes down to mainly two things, I would say. And those things I learned at the consulting seminar when I went to Japan with a company that focused on German and Japanese relationships. And basically in the seminar, that company wanted to teach the participants of the seminar more about Japanese culture to kind of work better in an intercultural environment. So I will kind of share you 2 points that they shared with me there. So one big important point comes down to natural disasters. And natural disasters can be considered in Japan as earthquakes, that you maybe have heard on the 2011 earthquake in Fukushima, or maybe tsunamis. And also, maybe you didn't hear already about this, but volcano eruptions. Because Japan usually has an eruption of the Fuji every about 300 years, or one time in 300 years, if I remember it correctly. So you can see that Japan is a really uncertain society. You have many natural disasters that can really change your whole life or your whole living condition from one way to the other. And that basically results as things that you maybe already heard, as a group-oriented society or a risk-aversion society, or also a hard-working society. Because basically in Japan, if you don't have a group you can rely on, if you don't work really hard every day, it can mean that the next day when an earthquake destroys everything you have, you don't have the time, the money, and the energy to rebuild this all on your own. That's why you need to be hardworking to rebuild it, and that's why you need to be group-oriented. And of course, to belong to a group, if you want to get along with many people in the group, then maybe you will often put your own impression, your own opinion, your own feelings behind what the group expects from you. Because expressing yourself is not as important as being part of the group that will save your life when it comes down to natural disasters. And the second reason that I didn't hear that much in the internet at all is, in my opinion, about the fact that Japan is about 70 to 80% consistent of mountains. So basically, you have to think about Japan, let's say 500 years ago. You didn't have a plane, you didn't have cars to move around. You basically were relying on your feet or on a horse. And you have to imagine that if you, for example, look at Osaka and Tokyo, there's really big like mountains between it. And usually in Japan, like I told you, there's 70, 80% mountains. So it doesn't matter where you want to go, you have to kind of climb the mountain. And you have to imagine that, let's say, if you live at a village and you're part of the group inside this village, you cannot just go to a different city. If we take Germany, for example, we don't have that many mountains. So even if you just have a horse or you go by foot, it's pretty easy to go to different cities compared to Japan. So basically, going away from your village, climbing that mountain, and even going through that mountain, because you have to imagine that there were not that many roads back then, so you have to kind of make your own way through the mountain and the forest, you can see that this is pretty dangerous. And also it's pretty hard to do. So you have to always be in the same village with the same people. And this always means when an earthquake comes, there will be no other village that will maybe help you because they're too far away. And you will not even have a, let's say, general thinking about what happened to that village. So basically you need to focus on your own village, on your own people, and you need to get along with those people. Because at the end, if there's an earthquake or a natural disaster, or maybe you have a disaster inside your family that some person that was dear to you just died all of a sudden, they are the only people that can help you and also help you to survive. So basically those two geographical factors, I would say, was a reason or a starting point for building this kind of culture that lives until today. So in this part, I want to talk about actual experiences, and there are around about 2 to 3 about them that I had when I was at Nomikai in Japan. And so basically I have one example each, one example where I went drinking with friends, and one example where I heard about a company related drinking, to kind of give you an insight how will those cultural concepts even look at the Nomikai. Because you will maybe think like, okay, there are good cultural theories and maybe they make sense, but where can you actually see them? And that's why I want to talk about those examples. So one example is I went to drink together with friends, Japanese friends. And you have to imagine that when I went to the university, usually you get a tutor, so a person that is responsible for you and that tries to assist you. And because I'm from Germany and he was from Japan, I think we had many kind of communicational issues. So in other words, he wanted to meet more often with me together, while I didn't meet him as often as he wanted me to meet him. And basically, usually you will just show your hone to really, really close friends or to people you meet at the nomikai. And basically, his real opinion about me was, and what he really wanted to tell me is, when do you have time? Let's meet. But because in Japan it's really important to not bother your other people with your feelings or your intentions, he always showed me his tatemai and never really talked to me about what he really was thinking about the situation. And in this case, then it came to one evening that I went to the nomikai and we were drinking much alcohol together. And then all of a sudden he looked at another person and he said, you know, Victor is never meeting me and he never really wants to meet me or make time for me. And I was kind of shocked at this moment because he kind of really instantly just threw it to me, you know, and kind of judged me for this. And well, we don't need to talk about this, why this happened or anything that is not interesting. But just in this case, you can see that really in this case, he took the nomikai as a chance. And in my opinion, it felt to me like he wanted to talk me bad in front of other people. That was my actual opinion about the situation. But maybe if you think about the Japanese culture, this was finally his moment or his opportunity to share his opinion with me. Um, that's how you can maybe think about it. And then you will maybe ask, but Victor, will people really just tell their opinion when they meet you at the nomikai? And in my experience is that, of course, people will not tell it the same way as the tutor told it to me. Maybe they will still tell it a bit more, let's say, politely. But going drinking with Japanese people is a really good opportunity to find out what your, let's say, what your real connection or relationship to that person is. And then you will maybe ask something, but is it really the only option to hear the opinion of a Japanese person? And there's another thing that I want to talk to you about. And that is something that I was the same with my tutor, was that I was inside a group. And like I told you before, groups in Japan are pretty important. So I was in a group that was responsible for like a presentation group about some topics. And I was in a group with many foreign students and also Japanese people. And usually in Germany, I'm kind of, how to say, used to the fact that when people have a problem or when people have something to tell me, then they will come to me directly and tell it to me. But in this case, because you remember we have the tatemai, people will not tell you what they think really directly. Of course, there are some people that will do it, even in Japan, but usually. And at this time, the person already had the problem with me not hanging out with him as much as he wanted me to do. So what he did was talking to one member of the group about the fact that yeah, he wants to meet me more and he seems like that I don't want to meet him, and he talked with this to another person. And then that person came to me and talked to me about this topic. And in this point, the first thing I was thinking is, why don't you tell it directly to me? And I was thinking a bit about this situation and why he told it this way, but I think it's also another way to like respect the barriers of people in Japan. So to like, if you really share your opinion directly, or in this case, criticize someone directly, maybe this can kind of disturb the group and let's say the harmony of the group, and that is something he wanted to avoid. And that is also something or a similar thing that I found out at my researches that I want to share with you after I tell you the last example that I have. And now this example is company related, and this is also related to my studies and researches I did about Japanese company culture, and also one, let's say, impression that the person that already works in Japan told me. And and basically, you know, Japan is prone to have many overwork time, right? And one reason, in my opinion and my research for this reason, or one reason for this thing is that people in Japan always need to show their tatemai. That's what I explained to you before, right? And to really get to know the people from your workplace, usually after work, many people go to nomikai. And the reason why many people do this is to get to know, to really get to know their work colleagues and to really get to know what kind of person they are and what they really think. Because if you don't do it this way, if you don't go to the nomikais, you will never really understand how the people in your company think about you. And when you go to the nomikai, usually when you, and that was told to me by another person, usually when you can drink much alcohol and when you go to the nomikai often and drink much, people will really see you as a, let's say, better person. Because that is something that comes inside Japanese society. People know that there are some spaces where you can talk openly and where you can really create relationships. And usually it is nomikai. And let's say you don't come to the nomikai, then people will really think about you that you don't want to get to know them. And that is something that can be really fatal in Japan. Because when you're part of Japanese society and you really want to be part of Japanese society, you need to kind of show them that you want to get to know the people or that you want to get them to know. And of course, there are many things that you can do, like learning Japanese is one thing you can do to be part of the society, or let's say in your lunch breaks, going together with your colleagues is also one thing that you can do. And nomikai is also one thing to get to know people better. And that is also still the reason why many people go to this nomikai, is because they don't want to get excluded. They want to be part of the group. They don't want to be seen as a person that skips the nomikai, doesn't care about the people's opinions, and don't want to talk to the people. And yeah, that is kind of the manifestation, or the, let's say, cultural background of nomikai. And to come back to the example that I just told you about, if there's not, is there not another way to talk or to listen to people's opinion than listening to them at nomikai? And like I told you before, I had that experience that instead of my tutor telling it things to me directly, he talked to another person, and that person told me what he told me. And then I told the person what I thought about it, and he told it to that person. And basically, there's a common culture. If you want to bring your opinion to another person, usually you will have a middleman. And that is something that in company cultures is pretty often used. So basically, when you have a problem with someone, or when you have a problem in general, let's say you have a problem with person A, then you will talk to a person that is close to person A about this problem, and he will try to tell it to person A. And that is kind of, let's say, way of conflict management in Japanese society, I would say. And basically, in this video, I don't want to tell you which culture is right or wrong. I don't want to tell you that Japanese group-oriented society is better. I don't want to tell you that, let's say, German individualistic society is better. In my opinion, for example, I tend to think more that Japanese society is a bit more better, but there are also people that think the whole opposite. And at the end, it is about you. It depends which kind of person are you, what things do you prefer, what things are important for you, and this also determines which society is better for you, but not determines which society is better in general. And that's what I want to, like, for you to keep in mind when I talk about societies and cultures and so on. And to kind of give you a thinking, and I think it's really an interesting thing to think about, to kind of contrast your own, in this case, individualistic society, there was one sentence that I heard when I was talking psychology. So basically, my psychology professor, one time, I studied it for just about 1 year, but in this 1 year, that professor had one time where he asked the students, well, who are you basically? And you know, there's many things how you can say who you are. You can say, I'm Victor, and I don't know, I'm a human, or I'm a German, or maybe I did swimming for a long time, I'm a swimmer. So there are many things how you can say who you are. But in our society, we tend to really think closely just about us, that everything inside our body and everything inside our mind is just us. But there was one really interesting thing that he told us at that lesson, and that was, if you have a child, for example, if someone hurts that child with a knife, let's say, or if someone hurts you with a knife, or your arm with a knife, which of the two things does hurt you more? That your child is getting threatened by a knife, or that just your arm is getting threatened by your knife? And in this case, I think many people would say that your child is getting threatened by a knife is much, much more, let's say, disturbing or more worrisome than your arm. And then he told us, yeah, that's right, because the child is more part of yourself than your arm. And when I heard that sentence, that kind of shocked me. Like, I was like, whoa. And that is one thing that is really, let's say, good to think about when you think about Japanese society. Because I think Japanese people in some way realized that even some other people can be more important, or more, let's say, important to survive, or more emotionally important to them than just themselves or their own bodies. And that is something I want you to maybe think about when you think about individualistic and group-oriented societies. So you can see that nomikai really goes into some deeper cultural topics. And at the end, why do people go drinking at the end in Japan? And you can just say in general, it's to socialize. It's to really get to know the person. So maybe if you get invited by a Japanese person to drink together with them, and this is not just a way to invite you to drink with them together, it is really also something of a Japanese person to tell you, I want to talk to you and I want to really get to know you. So in this case, I think this is a good sign if many Japanese people want to drink together with you, because they really care about what you think and about your opinions. And then at the end, you will maybe say, but what if I don't like to drink? And I know that there are many people that don't like to drink, alcohol in this case. And in this case, I can tell you that the experience I personally had when I was drinking with Japanese people at Japan, usually people don't get forced that much to drink. So in first case, you don't need to attend the nomikai. You can just maybe try to meet them at different occasions. And also lastly to this kind of part, the old drunk Japanese person I met on the street. So basically I one time wanted to do a video in Japan, and the drunk old Japanese person talked to me and we talked about many topics, and he also told me at that time then that drinking in Japan is a really common thing. So drinking together with other people, drinking even beer, for example, at their workplace. He, for example, told me that they always had a drawer with beer inside and stuff like this. I mean, maybe it's just something about this Japanese oji-san, but in general, you can see that alcohol plays a pretty important part in Japanese society to socialize. So at the end, what is nomikai? You kind of learned about the different cultural nuances of nomikai, you learned where the origin of nomikai is, and you learned about in which kind of places nomikai can appear and which kind of forms. And basically, at the end, you can say nomikai is to socialize. It's to socialize, it's to get to know the other person, it's to find out about their opinion. And in this case, if a Japanese person ever invites you to go drinking with them together, then for them it is not just about drinking alcohol, it is really about hearing your opinion. It is like a call of them to kind of hear about your opinion, to get to know you better, and to kind of check what relationship do you both have. Like I said, it's not the same thing for every Japanese person. It will be different from person to person. And also for people that don't really like to drink alcohol, maybe if you listen to this video, it will kind of sound a bit like, okay, when you go to Japan, you have to drink alcohol to make friends with Japanese people. But don't forget that drinking or drinking culture is just one part of Japanese society. And you can do many things in Japan to kind of adapt to Japanese society. And another thing would be just to learn Japanese, for example. And you can learn Japanese, for example. You can be part of some sports clubs, for example, or you can be part of nomikai. And at the end, it's about you, and you can choose which parts of Japanese culture you want to get inside and which parts of Japanese culture you want to avoid. And also because you're a foreigner, I think many Japanese will also understand that this is not part of your culture, and that maybe there's another way to build a good relationship to that person. So in this case, in my opinion, if you like alcohol, it's a really good thing to go to a nomikai if you have the opportunity. If not, then you can just do other things with Japanese people.